Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from analogstickgaming.com. If you don't know us, my name is Jordan, and to my left, as always, is the founder of Analog Stick Gaming, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
Oh, not too bad. Day off, so
Nice,
got to
nice.
play some games after this. So
I mean, yeah, we had a little bit of a mix-up. You got up early. I'm recording earlier than usual because time zones and clock changes.
daylight savings time.
Yeah, this is very fun. But I'm looking forward to this. I am slightly under the weather today, so please forgive me if I sound bizarre, but I think I have maybe some sort of mild flu coming on or something, so we'll see about that. Hopefully I can avoid it. But
Okay, part four.
I I feel like what's happened is the world has decided to make me slightly ill because we have some good news to talk about for once.
Yeah, we almost didn't have layoffs today.
Almost.
Almost.
Yeah. So with all of that being said, why don't we get straight into the mix of the news, Jeff? Because I know you have a few things set up there for us to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. So Pocket Pair, who is the developer on Palworld, is talking about bringing the platform or the game to new platforms. This comes to us from VGC. Pocket Pair has said its discussions to bring its smash hit Palworld to additional platforms. Released in January via Steam Early Access and Xbox Game Preview, Palworld attracted 25 million players in its first month, according to the studio. They didn't specify if the game could come to PlayStation, Nintendo, or mobile devices in the future. Pocket Pair CEO and game director Takura Mazoe told Bloomberg the company is in talks to bring it to more platforms. He also said Pocket Pair would be open to considering offers for partnerships or acquisition, but that the company hasn't engaged in buyout talks with Microsoft. According to Xbox maker Palworld, enjoyed the biggest third-party Game Pass launch to date. Palworld purportedly cost less than 1 billion yen, which is 6.7 million, to make, and has returned tens of billions of yen in profit. We are and will remain a small studio. As always said, I want to make multiple small games. Big budget AAA games are not for us. Games are most fun when playing with friends, he added. A game without a multiplayer mode just doesn't feel right in the era we live today. Now, Pal World, I think it was on a different article that I was reading. Apparently, they only have 55 employees. So, I mean, they're
Yeah.
making
So
this for two
so
platforms right now,
I
and it's still in
saw
early access.
I saw some stats coming out, and it was the studio has 55 employees. It was 6 point something million, as you said, to develop. As you mentioned there as well, they sort of confirmed that they are interested in either a partnership or some sort of acquisition, but they haven't officially spoken to anybody yet. That this is just me speculating, but that kind of says to me that they're not being completely truthful about that, and I think that maybe some preliminary discussions might have at least happened because we did have a rumor coming out a couple of weeks ago now that maybe Microsoft were interested in an acquisition there.
And it would be cheap for them too.
Yeah, it
Like,
would.
but here's the thing though, is sure, they've lucked out with Palworld. And do they essentially get that thing to 1.0 and then immediately start on Palworld 2 and then refine that?
Or
Or do you go to something else that,
here's the other question for you though. Does Pal World just become like another Minecraft? Right? So like that might be why somebody like Microsoft is looking at it right now because there is an opportunity to make this a platform game, right?
yeah, like I was saying, it's like you have Palworld, which is a guaranteed success. And then Palworld 2, I think, would be a lesser success because I think that hype would kind of fall off. They're also talking about making multiple games, and do those like attract any type of audience? Because again, Palworld get that those sales because it was a Pokemon like
Yeah.
set within a survival game.
Mhm.
So if you take away the Pokemon aspect of it and then they start making other games, do those have any type of popularity other
I
than from the
think
makers of Power World?
I think that they have some. it's kind of like anything, right? Once a studio builds up some level of reputation and rapport with the audience, you kind of people will buy their next game and people will be interested in their next game because they've seen Power World and because they know,
Yeah,
okay, this
but
studio can make a decent game.
I don't see Craftopia hitting up the sales charts for people like looking into their back catalog,
True,
you
true.
know. So I'm not too sure, but I mean, like again, like Power World was a massive success with the simple fact that it only cost like 6.7 million, and it's
And they've
reached
made that
25.
money easy.
Oh yeah, like massive success. Um, like if Microsoft was like say, hey, we'll purchase your studio for 25 million,
Yeah, yeah.
they'll make that back
And
on
what
like
I could
1.0
see happening, to be honest, is uh obviously we saw recently that Toys for Bob have gone independent, but they're potentially looking at some sort of publishing deal with Microsoft. I can see that being the next step for this for the Power World studio.
And they
Maybe they
had
get a
Microsoft
publishing deal.
they had Microsoft engineers helping with the Xbox port as well too. So
Yeah,
they've got history of working directly with Microsoft, like
yeah,
not just from a publishing deal,
yeah.
um,
And
or
what I
a
want to
Game
say
Pass
is,
deal or
look, I
anything.
know that not everybody advocates for kind of acquisitions and all this consolidation and stuff, and there are very clear reasons for that. Embracer Group, um, but at the end of the day, as I've kind of mentioned before, I think the problem is that have this human beings have this tendency to automatically be negative about every single thing that exists. And it's kind of like, instead of being positive and then being negative when you have a reason to, your negativity is always the first thing. And sure, we can look at Microsoft and say they've bought a lot of studios, but what have they really done so far, right? Yeah, you could have that as part of your thinking, but you also have to be realistic. I guarantee you that some of these studios that Microsoft have purchased, especially the ones they purchased back in 2018, might not even exist now if they hadn't have been purchased. So consolidation offers a level of security that isn't going to exist in the industry anywhere else for much longer. And I'm not talking about consolidation on the scale of Embracer Group, because we've seen what's happened with them. I think they owned over 100 studios at one point, and we've
It was
obviously got
126 or something like that.
some news obviously from one of their studios coming up. But it's just like, I think somebody like the Power World developers, they're a small studio, and those are the kind of studios that actually benefit massively from acquisition by any bigger company in a
Or even
lot
like
of ways.
a substantial publishing deal.
Precisely, that's the other option, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Is I could see a situation where maybe the next step for them in there, if it is Microsoft that they choose to work with, I could see it being, okay, we will now publish your game. We'll pick up the publishing rights to this game, because I don't know who published Power World. Do we have an answer for that? Did they because they didn't self-publish, did they? I don't think so. If the publishing rights are available, I could quite easily see Microsoft picking up those publishing rights and going and publishing it on other platforms, because this is exactly the kind of game they were talking about that benefits from being on other platforms, right?
Yeah, it was self-published. It was created and published by Japanese developer Pocket Pair.
Oh, nice. So because it's self-published, they could potentially make a publishing deal even for Power World, and they could go and publish it on other platforms potentially, and that is something that could then secure the studio Pocket Pair their next game, right? Like if those publishing rights are picked up for 10 million, let's say, and they go, yeah, we'll pay you 10 million and we're going to publish the game on PlayStation and Nintendo.
Yeah, they have to hit 1.0 to be on PlayStation because PlayStation doesn't really allow early
That's
access.
very true. That's very true. So, but yeah, I most of all when I saw this news come out, the thing that I thought to myself was, I'm just so glad to see a game like this being a massive success, because it shows that you don't have to be this massive $200 million game to find massive success, right? You just don't, like. And I think we've seen recently, I know you don't have this in the news, but there is a lot of conversation about Rise of Ronin and how that maybe doesn't look as good as some people would like it to look and all this kind of stuff. And people are sort of being very negative about the game based
Yeah,
mostly
see, like
on graphical look.
I'm I'm interested in trying it out because I think it looks fun. It's just my funds just don't line up. I just,
Yeah,
and we don't
absolutely.
really have a partnership kind of with I think with the PR company that's handling that as far as I know.
That's a hard one to get for sure. But it's just like I see people complaining about that, right? And one of the things I've seen recently is like, I think it was today that Michael Mumbauer, who used to work for PlayStation and now is at Lithos, founded Lithos with John Garvin, and he sort of made the point that years ago what happened was they created all these amazing pipelines for motion capture and high end visuals and all that kind of stuff, just like movies did. But over time, that stuff has become more and more expensive to produce. And
Mm.
he was making the point that just like movies, it's got to the point where it's almost too expensive. So the quality of visuals is going to go down slightly in order to save money. Like, that's going to happen. Um, and also, it's something we've spoken about before, that you also have to bear in mind that different sizes of game will be able to achieve different levels of visual quality. Because,
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely that. Like, I'm not going to state what it is I'm playing, but there's a game that I'm currently playing under embargo where majority of that game looks fantastic, but its people just don't quite live up. And when you have a certain design of what your character is supposed to look like,
yeah,
from the reference material, it doesn't always hit those
yeah,
highs. And the same with like Outcast, which I just put a preview out for that we'll be talking about later.
yes,
People in that game don't look fantastic. And I think that you get a game like Outcast, and it looks fantastic visually from its world and whatnot. And I think that once developers start taking advantage of some of the tools, especially for Unreal Engine 5, which has that people builder type of thing that they can, use for their games. I think once you get the people looking fine from a preset type of tool set that makes those things cheaper,
yeah.
people won't really notice those budgetary
Well,
things because again,
this is exactly why
worlds look
something
fantastic.
like Unreal Engine 5 is such a powerful tool, right? Because
Yeah.
the tool that you're talking about there is MetaHuman, which is where you can essentially create these characters from these presets, and you can even upload your own data into it
Yeah.
and
And
more easily create
I think
characters that
once
way.
they get the people figured out on these kind of lower budget games,
Mhm.
um, I don't think people are going to notice it that much because again, like with Outcast and this other game, it's the people look almost good.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well, just before we move on to some more news, is that people forget that there are different art styles, and like, you can have the same game made in two completely different art styles, and they will look different from a visual quality standpoint based on which art style you prefer. For some
Because
people, the
yeah,
Ori games are the best looking games ever made, and for some people, it would be like Last of Us 2. Do you know what I mean? It's
Let's
different
not get
art
ahead of ourselves.
styles make a difference.
Yeah, it's just like Pokemon Legends Arceus. When it went with that watercolor thing, people were like, "Oh, this looks like crap." I'm like, "Well, no, because it's supposed to look like a watercolor painting,
Yeah.
so it's going to have that smudgy kind of look to it." And people were like, "No, this looks like
And I,
shit."
and I think that's the thing is as gamers, we've been spoilt because technology over the years has meant that as it's improved, any visual style automatically looks better, right? But we've now got to the point where visual tech outside of AI advancements it is plateauing slightly in terms of what they can do with it at the moment. And I think that just means that they're trying to do, more interesting things. And we see different art styles being used. Like, what was the game? Return of the Obra Dinn, right? And it's like, that looks completely different to so many games out there. But
Yeah, and a lot of times, like a look is kind of a limitation of like the capability of a student or
yeah,
a studio, because like you got a lot of games that were even on like the PlayStation or PlayStation 2 or whatever the case is, where they were kind of limited by tech, so they kind of went with certain visual styles. Some games even went cell shaded
yeah.
because it was to hide, you know,
And
some
also,
visual oddities.
the other thing is, people just forget that not every game is trying to be the best visual game in the world. Like, if we look at something like The Order, right? That game wasn't an amazing game, but it chose to make its selling point. We are going to show you what is possible visually on these machines. And
They
that is
spent
what
all
they
their
did.
entire budget on that and not on the game because the game was like
Yeah.
4 hours.
But it's one of those weird things where but because they made that choice to make that their thing, look at how good those visuals are even now, right? Like
Yeah,
they
but look at Rise, Son of Rome. That game was like what, two times as long and looked just as good.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So I just think, there's a lot of strange things, but I love seeing a game like Power World do really well because it just proves that you don't have to be this big budget game. And I think that us as gamers over the next couple of years do probably need to adjust our expectations slightly as the industry goes through these big changes, because in order to kind of make the industry more sustainable isn't even the right word, because the industry makes a lot of money, but to make projects less risky, they are going to cut back in certain areas, right? Because why spend 200 million on a game when you could cut back the visual quality, and that might save you like 30, 40 million over the course of development, and that's a lot of money. So I think we just need to adjust our expectations slightly, wait for more tech advancements to come over the next few years. We've seen Unreal Engine 5 being implemented in a few games over the last year or so, and more of
Yeah,
those are gonna,
Multiverses
yeah,
is going to re-release at the end of May, and they jumped to Unreal 5.
and it's like more of those games are gonna come, and as devs get better at using that engine and using that new tool set, games will start to look significantly better again. But we're just in this kind of plateau at the moment in a visual standpoint. And like I said, to tie it into the Power World news, I'm glad that Power World is a game that has been able to be this small, very small budget thing, right? Like it's essentially a premium indie game, and they've been a massive success.
And just in early access so far.
Yeah,
But so while Craftopia, their prior game, is not doing that well, another studio's prior game is doing better than their most current game, and that is that Payday 2 now has almost 85 times as many average players as Payday 3.
That's
This is from
crazy.
VGC as well. On Tuesday, Starbreeze announced that it ousted its current CEO following Payday 3's disappointing performance, and the latest Steam numbers illustrate the scale of that underperformance. According to the independent Steam tracker, SteamDB, in the last 24 hours, Payday has enjoyed a peak player count of 31,866. Payday 2. In contrast, Payday 3 achieved a peak count of 378 players. While this number doesn't account for console players, it throws into sharp relief the views that Payday community. At one time in March 11th, fewer than 130 people were playing Payday 3. Payday 3 got off to a respectable start, charting off 77,938 peak players at launch, but a string of technical issues and a breakdown of communication between developer Starbreeze and its community has seemingly contributed to the game's player count dropping. I don't even know what that word is. I'm going to say sharply. All right. Major server issues. While Starbreeze blamed on problems with external matchmaking software, marred the co-op game's late September release, while fans were also left frustrated by an extended wait for the title's first update. Yeah, it goes on for a little bit more of the story, but yeah, I remember when Payday 3 came out, all I heard was bad press. I didn't hear anything
Yeah.
good about it. I watched Giant
I
Bomb
heard
play it.
nothing
They
good.
had a riot. I loved what they were doing with that. But from
And I
a
mean,
gameplay point,
it was a strange one because when it initially came out, I did sort of think to myself, is this just the typical initial launch problems of a game of that kind? Because we often see, like look at, for example, Outriders, which is a game that I actually really liked. I thought Outriders was a good game. However, because it had so many server issues and that kind of thing, it really did get a bad reputation that it probably, the game itself didn't deserve. It was the
yeah, especially when you
technical
had the
issues.
where it was deleting people's characters and guns and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, it had a lot of
and
lot of issues.
and I thought that Payday 3 was initially just that, you know, same kind of situation, um, and that they would fix it and then it would be great over time. And that doesn't seem to be really what the situation was. Apparently, the game is just not very good.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like the the game seemed to have just been released too early. Like it didn't have
Yeah.
the care and attention that I think it needed. And I think honestly a good launch for this game would have probably set it to just below Payday 2's high point because I don't think people were really clamoring for Payday 3.
Yeah.
Not in the same way. Because we even saw like very similar types of games with was it Rockay City where it
Oh
was kind of like
yes,
a
yeah.
payday like
Mhm.
um and that didn't do terribly well despite it having like Danny Glover and like Chuck Norris and
That what
um
that game showed is that having a well-known cast doesn't do anything for you in gaming unless the
I'll
game
try
is
it if it
good.
comes to Game Pass, but there's no way on God's green earth that I'm interested in buying
Yeah.
Renegade City. Um, but yeah, like I don't know with Payday 3, it's Payday 2 is doing well, and that is because people do want that type of game. Again, it's not a massive success right now. It's only pushing like what 80,000 concurrent players, which
I mean,
is
that's a
not much
decent
in the
number
grand
of
scheme of
players
things.
though. That's
It's still good. So people obviously want Payday 3 to succeed, but they're getting that through Payday 2. So I
yeah.
think that if the developers were to kind of almost like soft reboot the game, um, I think it could do good. I think they just have to kind of like get the
It feels like the kind of game that at this point needs some sort of major DLC to be a new starting point for people to
yeah
kind of revisit it and try again, because I am sure that there are people that would have enjoyed it but jumped off because of those bad technical issues at, at the initial release. I know a couple of friends of mine who they bought it and they tried to play it the first 2 or 3 days, and because they could hardly get into the game, they were just like, okay, we're not going to bother. And then after that, they just kind of moved on, right? Because there's too many other games to play all the time. And I think that unfortunately, that's the situation we're in now, where, yeah, certain types of games are always going to have issues at launch, especially server based games, because.
It's on Game Pass. Payday 3 is on Game Pass.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That makes me wonder why it's not maybe more of a success than than it is. Um, but yeah, this situation is bad because the company have actually got rid of someone. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, we're getting rid of you
Yeah,
because
like
this was
you
bad.
get rid of your CAO because like they were just saying like they kind of needed new leadership. And I mean like that's the biggest thing with a lot of these companies. Their leaderships often can either make absolutely stellar plays or they can make decisions that absolutely just cripple the studio.
Well, look at Don Matrick. He's the only example you ever need of of that. Like, I just it I just think when it gets to that level where they're changing the leadership of the entire company and not just like a specific team or whatever, you know that there's a problem. You know that something went seriously wrong there, to the point where that board has kind of decided, no, we need a completely different direction because where we're heading isn't working, right? Um, so it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds for
You should
them.
just do the Call of Duty skew or skins and stuff and Fortnite skins for like Payday, where you
Did
could
you
have like
see? That
key
reminds me.
packs or like Fast and Furious pack.
You might not have seen this, Jeff, but I think it was last week. Call of Duty released a skin that looked incredibly like the Avowed cover, but it's a multiplayer skin. Do you know what I'm on about? Like, you know
Hmm.
the Avowed cover art. Call of Duty have essentially released a skin that looks very, very inspired by this Avowed cover art, and people were like, it's like so obvious, and they don't know whether it was someone at Microsoft said, "Oh, let's do this," or whether
Oh yeah,
someone.
Call of Duty covers. Oh my God.
Have you seen? Yeah, I know, right?
That is like copying somebody's homework. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Like yeah, like holy hell.
It's literally the Avowed cover with a slightly different outfit. That's the way it is.
Yeah, like everybody's covering this thing. It's oh my God.
Uh,
That is that is
well, at least
hilarious.
that tells you that Avowed has a very good cover. If it's like, they're like, yeah, we'll just make it into a Call of Duty skin.
Yeah. Well,
Look at it. I mean, that's so obviously just
like
like,
it's even got like the flowing um stuff. Yeah, like everybody's covering this. Holy hell. Yeah,
yeah,
it has big avowed energy.
yeah, yeah. It just, when you were talking about Call of Duty skins just then, it just reminded me of it, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it because it's so blatantly like.
Well, Call of Duty's Microsoft lawyers will be hearing from Microsoft lawyers.
Yeah, I know.
So they're just gonna be like, hey, yeah,
I
yeah, we're
do,
suing you.
do you know what the
Oh, really? Oh my God, bring your best lawyers.
do you know what the funniest thing is? I would love to know, because obviously they're still in their integration process, but I would love to know if it was someone at Microsoft who made that call, or whether someone on the team just went, "Oh, I like this cover, and we work for them now, so we can do this without getting in trouble." Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
like the thing too is you have to like I don't know how long the process is to
Mm,
make skins. That timing, my God.
It's so weird, right? It almost feels like completely intentional.
Yeah, it's just like somebody was just watching like the Avowed thing, and they're like, "Hey, hey, hey, yeah, make that skin right now, right now." We're like, "Oh, but we're working
uh,
on like the like Lady Gaga skin." It's like, push it to the side, push it to the side,
so,
just make that.
but it makes me think of an interesting, fun question for you, Jeff. And I think this is a fun one for the Xbox community in general. How long do we think it is before there's a Master Chief skin in Call of Duty?
Um,
Because that's going to happen, right?
yeah, I mean it won't be the first time you can play as Master Chief on another console as well. I mean, Fortnite
True,
allows you
true.
to kind of do that as well too. So yeah, I don't think it'd be that long. I think
Fair.
probably like I honestly, if I had to put money on it, I would say that it would be around the time of the next Call of Duty launch.
Okay, interesting, interesting.
So that it would be the first skin
And it would be a
of
good way
that.
to tie the Call of Duty franchise to Xbox even more, right? If that's one of the
Yeah.
first skins they
I think
release.
it'll be the first premium skin on the next Call of Duty or the next iteration of Warzone.
Yeah, that makes
So whenever
sense.
that,
That makes
that
sense.
crosses over.
So, what other news do we have today?
So we loved Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Yes,
I thought that game was absolutely fantastic.
fantastic
It's
game.
criminally underrated in
I have to
regards
go
to
back and
its
finish it actually because it was so good.
very, very good. So, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is to receive story DLC and free add-ons, Ubisoft has announced. The publisher has revealed the game's roadmap, which includes free content coming later this month. Warrior's Path, the first free piece of content, will include a speedrun mode, death mode, and new outfits for the game's protagonist, Sargon. In spring 2024, a boss rush mode will be added alongside more new costumes. In summer of 2024, the Divine Trials updates will add new combat, platform, and puzzle challenges, as well as new amulets, outfits, and more. So lots of outfits. Finally, Ubisoft has announced that later this year, the new story DLC will be added to the game, although it did not detail its contents. Um, so yeah, you can check the roadmap on their official Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown Twitter.
Yeah, I do.
But
I do want to say
the thing
something
that I want,
quickly as well about the game. Um, it may not still be on sale, but at time of recording, this game is on sale. And please do yourself a favor and go and pick it up. Like, this is one of maybe two must play games so far this year. And when I say must play, like, this is a must play game. This is a game that can be strongly argued as one of the best ever in its genre of game. Like, that's how good it
I will
is.
stress that we both did receive code from Ubisoft.
Yeah.
So definitely take our opinion with a grain of salt. But
But
you can check out our
but
review.
you can take our opinion with a grain of salt. But also, I think that if you check any other review or pretty much any other
Critically, it's
opinion
it's
of this
doing
game,
well.
it's like this
Yeah,
game deserves to have a lot more players than it does. And I would just say that if you haven't picked it up full price and you can pick it up on sale, or even if you sign up to a month of Ubisoft Plus, which you can get on Xbox consoles or on
you can play
PC.
Skull and Bones right after you beat it.
I
Done.
really, I really, really would recommend playing it, and that comes from someone who hasn't even finished the game. Jeff has, I believe, finished the game and
Oh, yeah.
loved it even more than I did. So yeah, but
From what I want,
I was gonna say I am really glad that they're continuing to support this game because after we heard those initial sales and everything, I wasn't sure that they were going to add anything to this game.
especially that the DLC seems to be free.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think that's because they just want people buying the base game.
True.
But
True.
what I want from the story mode DLC is I just want to know where one of the characters ended up, because you go in there with a small little army of these immortals, and one immortal you meet later on, and she just kind of fucks off. You don't see her for the rest of the game. So
Maybe
I'm
that's
hoping that the
exactly
story
what the
DLC is,
DLC is.
because like, yeah, like she's like, oh, I'll go my own way or whatever, and then you do not see her for the rest of the game.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
interesting, but I do like honestly, I can't say enough good things about this game, but there is part of me that wonders, are they gonna, will we see more Prince of Persia, but also will we see more Prince of Persia that isn't this style of game? Like, will they do
No,
something else with it, or
no,
you don't think so?
no. They have Assassin's Creed for their 3D game,
Makes sense.
and
Makes
Prince of
sense.
Persia kind of spawned from, um, or Assassin's Creed kind of spawned from Prince of Persia. So
True.
I don't see them creating two games that look visually identical.
True, true. Very good point. But we'll see what the future holds. I did see recently, I don't know if you have this in the news, but other Ubisoft news is that Star Wars Outlaws is launching on PC with a lot of Nvidia support, so they're going to have like, DLSS and all that kind of good stuff. So from a technical perspective, you would imagine that on PC that game is going to do quite well, and I'm glad about that because not every Ubisoft game does very well on PC. So that's good for that crowd that they're kind of,
Almost not any game kind of launches well on PC. Like some of the PC ports lately for some big games have just been huge misses.
yeah, they have.
And
That's
I
true.
don't like, again, like it's much more difficult to create games of that scale for PC because you've got
So many variables. Yeah,
so many variables in regards to, graphics card and just, basic PC specs.
absolutely, absolutely.
There's so many different platforms. Um, Speaking of other platforms, Xbox's Sea of Thieves has topped PlayStation 5's digital pre-order charts.
I will
Um,
say,
Sea of
I will say before we quickly talk, before you go through the story, when I saw this story, I genuinely had a little laugh because I did not see this coming at all.
Xbox doesn't have games until they appear on PlayStation, apparently. So I don't know what that is. As initially noted by on Twitter by games industry data reporter Benji Sales, the premium edition of the game currently has the number one slot on PS5 console stores. Pre-order pages in the US when sorted by best selling. The standard edition is also in the top 10, sitting in fifth. This means that the game is currently pre-ordered more times in the US than MLB The Show 24, Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, which is apparently a trash fire at launch, Dragon's Dogma 2 Deluxe Edition, Elden Ring, Shadows of the Erdtree, and Rise of the Ronin. VGC can confirm that the situation is similar on the UK store, if not better. The UK's current pre-order top 10 on the PS5 console has the Premium Edition at number 1, and the Standard Edition at number 4, and the Deluxe Edition at number 2. So,
Honestly, this is
yeah, so
this is
what's
crazy.
this about Xbox not having
I
games?
know, I know. But I saw someone say that there is a thing about, you know, I saw someone make the point of he would love to know how many of the people actually buying these Xbox releases on PlayStation are people who haven't previously played the games. Because I know in the case of Pentiment, for example, which didn't sell massively well on PlayStation, but pretty much every person I know who bought Pentiment on PlayStation had actually already played the game. They were just buying it so that they could go and get the platinum on PlayStation. And I wonder, like, I'd love to know because clearly with Sea of Thieves, for it to be pre ordering that well and that well in more than one country, that means there's a lot of people probably pre ordering this game that have never played it before. And it does. It leaves me with this weird question of, well, if people are interested in these games, and clearly there are other Xbox games they're going to be interested in, why have those games not been drawing them to the Xbox ecosystem? Because all we ever hear about is, oh, it's all about games and Xbox don't have games. And it's like, but if you're not interested in their games, why are you all of a sudden buying it now it's on your machine? Like,
Yeah, I think it could just be a cost factor in regards to not wanting to shell out 4 or 5 or $600 for another console that they may not necessarily use all the time.
Makes
So by
sense.
shelling out $80 or $100 or whatever the premium editions are and stuff.
Until they start doing that 2 or 3 times a year every year. Like,
Yeah, I mean that it could very well be just a bunch of different factors, but
do
yeah,
you
it
know
could just
what?
be them just sticking to their
It's
platform.
gonna be interesting to see if Microsoft do continue with this strategy of, we're gonna release a few games here and there on PlayStation and on other platforms. Once it gets, I do wonder whether part of it is, let's do it now so that when the next generation comes, we can kind of say, oh, this sequel to that game you played on your PlayStation is now exclusive to our machine. And if you want to play it, you got to get our machine. Because I do think there are going to be some people who play these games and go, I genuinely thought Xbox didn't have good games. Because there are people who really believe that. Like, there are
Yeah,
people that.
Sea of Thieves, honestly, when it moves to PlayStation,
Mm,
it could be the most played first party game
yeah.
across both platforms.
Yeah. I mean,
Because I think it has more users right now than any PlayStation first
So
party game.
I think it. What I heard was it still has more than 10 million people a month playing it, which is a lot considering that I think 35 or 40 million people have played it in total so far, and you would imagine that that's going to go up by about 5 or 10 million over on the PlayStation side. Based on these pre-orders from what we can see, they're clearly selling well. Um I think that the one small concern about this from a Xbox fan perspective might be that, well, if this game is selling this well, then how long until they start thinking, well, what if we put our bigger games over? Do you know what I mean?
I think if they were going to do that, it would probably be like 2 to 3 years after they've been on Xbox.
I agree. I
So
agree
it's
with
not
you.
like you're not going to get Microsoft games
I
day
think
one
I
on
think that,
PlayStation.
look, as much as I think that podcast they did to update people didn't really give people much information in the sense of new information. It just kind of reaffirmed things they've been saying for years. One thing they did say that I genuinely believe to be the case is that one of their criteria seems to be that they won't move a game unless it's been, like, if it's an exclusive game that has been exclusive to Xbox for at least a year, then they'll consider it. And I think that that is what you're going to see moving forward, is they're effectively going to use timed exclusivity as their selling point, and then, you know, but I don't think they're wrong to do that, because if we look at games, most video games in existence sell the vast majority of their copies in the first few months. There are outliers like GTA 5 and things like that, but the vast majority of games within like the first 3 months have sold most of the copies that they're ever going to sell, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I do think as well, people forget how powerful timed exclusivity is, but it really is. Like, I remember people kicking off back in the day because one of the Tomb Raider games had a year exclusivity on Xbox. And it's like,
Mhm.
but that made people buy Xboxes because they wanted to play that game. Like, you know, the same thing that we saw with Final Fantasy VII Remake. We know that that was meant to be only a year exclusive initially. That was what the initial deal was for a year exclusivity, and they just kept re-upping it because it was very successful for them, because people
Yeah.
went and bought PlayStations to play that game. Like, I think a lot of people seem torn at the moment because one of the one of the kind of conversations I've seen around this whole Xbox games going on to PlayStation and stuff is, why would people, and I do to be fair, I think some of this thought process was when people thought that Game Pass was changing as well, and it's not, and Game Pass will still have the day one releases. But a lot of people seem to be of the mind of like, well, why would you ever buy an Xbox when you can buy a PlayStation and have access to all the games? And it's like, but my answer to that is most people, if they really want to play a game, won't wait a year to play it just so they can play it on their preferred platform. Like, they won't. Like, I know people who prefer PlayStation, and they will tell you, like, they bought an Xbox to play Starfield. And many of those people would have done so even if they said, oh yeah, it's coming to PlayStation in a year. Like, people are impatient, and in gaming we have a culture where you want to be in the conversation at the time the conversation is happening, not a year later. And so timed exclusivity is really, really powerful. And I think that it's funny how timed exclusivity over the years is something that we've liked when certain companies do it and really disliked when other companies do it. And that's interesting for me from a kind of gamer and media perspective, that two companies can do the same thing and they can be viewed completely differently. And there's a lot of negativity around these Xbox games going to PlayStation, but I don't see it as a negative thing. And I'm sure that Rare releasing their first ever game on PlayStation and topping the pre-order charts don't see it as a negative thing either. Like, let's
Oh, and I
remember.
think we'll see. I think we'll see a few other games head over. Like I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see Redfall eventually make that
Absolutely.
jump.
But let's remember that, the thing about Sea of Thieves as well is it's not just out pre-ordering like little nobody games. It's out pre-ordering Rise of the Ronin, which is one of Sony's like exclusives this year. It's out pre-ordering the Elden Ring
Dragon's Dogma.
DLC, which is long requested from so many people, like literally millions of people want this DLC. I'd love to know what these Sea of Thieves pre-order numbers are, because the most interesting thing about it, what you mentioned there as well in the story, Jeff, is like, this isn't one edition of the game that is out pre-ordering other things. It's like every edition of the game is out pre-ordering. Like, I I would love to know how, because I'm pretty sure they're selling this at full price, right? Like, they're not selling it at a discount. They're selling it as though it's a full price brand new release, and this game initially released what, 5-7 years ago, something like that. It's so,
Yeah, I
you
was just
know
checking the other exclusive numbers, and apparently Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not selling well.
oh, yeah, I saw that.
But Maximilian Dude was saying that so far the only sales that have been shown have been physical sales, not digital ones.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure about that, but I did see that in Japan it dropped by 90%, and it was already selling less than Final Fantasy 16 at that time. And 16
Yeah.
sold way less than 7 Remake. So I don't really know what's going on. Like, yeah, sure, I'm sure that if they're not reporting digital yet, that will make up some of those numbers. But I don't think it's going to make up 90%. Do you know what I mean? so
Yeah.
so something's happening, and I saw quite a lot of conversations online about, is the Final Fantasy franchise just finally kind of reaching its tail end? Does it not
Uh,
interest people
I
as
think
much
it's Square
anymore?
just releasing it on one platform.
Yeah,
Like if they had released it on PC and Xbox day one,
yeah.
we would be looking at
Do
probably
you,
one of the best-selling Final
so
Fantasies.
do you think then, and obviously we know they have contracts for exclusivity and things like that, but do you think that seeing numbers like this will make them reconsider their kind of practices in the future? because
Probably. I
because it
mean,
is
you've got a new
hurting their
Square
games, right?
systems and stuff, right, too. So
Well, I mean, we also heard rumors that they are bringing 16 to Xbox eventually. I think it was Jez Corden who kind of whispered that a couple of months ago, that he heard that that is basically in the works, and he doesn't know exactly when it is coming, but it is coming. That doesn't surprise me. And obviously they have a better working relationship with Xbox now than they have done for years. I think Phil Spencer and the team have done a good job at building that relationship, but it's so interesting to see Rebirth really not selling well. Like, I saw that in and this surprised me, but in the UK, WWE 2K24 actually outsold Rebirth, because
mm,
Rebirth dropped. So Rebirth was in its second week of release, but it dropped like 69% or something in the
yeah.
UK. And it's like, that's crazy. Like, I know that games do have a significant drop in week 2, they all do, but when we're talking somewhere between 70 and 90%, depending on region, that's a lot. That's a lot of sales to drop, especially when you consider something like Helldivers 2, which actually was rising in sales every week for like the first 3 or 4 weeks. Um so yeah, but congratulations to Rare. I'm really pleased to see Sea of Thieves pre-ordering well. It's a game that I haven't actually played for a few years, but every
Yeah.
time I play it, I really do enjoy it.
I jumped in when the Disney DLC dropped, but I never pushed through it. I only played it for like a few hours.
Ah, that's a shame. What other news do we have then, Jeff?
Sure, let's jump into the big guy here. So, Embracer confirms $247 million sale of Saber assets and withdrawals from Russia. Um, so, Embracer has officially sold off Saber Interactive, the group which is home to studios 3D Realms, Slipgate, Ironworks, and more, for 247 million. In an announcement to investors on Thursday, Embracer said the sale meant it would now cease all operations in Russia while improving its cash flow. Saber is being sold to a group of private investors under Beacon Interactive, a company controlled by Saber Interactive co-founder Matthew Karch. No, this is an update here. According to Bloomberg, Beacon intends to exercise an option to acquire 4A Games, which is the Metro studio, but not the Metro license, since that's tied up with licensing issues through Embracer, and Zen Studios, known for pinball, which would see the total value of the deal rise to around 500 million. Saber will keep studios Nimble Giant, which is known for Star Trek Infinite, 3D Realms, Iron Fury, Sandbox Strategies, New World Interactive, Insurgency, Slipgate Ironworks, known for Braven, Mad Head Games, known for Scars Above, which I reviewed, Fractured Bytes, Borderlands Legendary Collection, and Digic. Embracer will retain Tripwire, which is known for Chivalry, Beamdog, which is known for Mythforce, which I thought they shut down, Tuxedo Labs, which is known for Teardown, Demiurge, Shiver, which is known for Lucius, Aspire, which is known for the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, Snapshot Games, known for Phoenix Point, and 34 Big T Things, known for Redout. Saber's buyer has also been granted an option right to acquire 4A Games and Zen Studios for a fixed price within a certain time period. Due to commercial reasons, the parties have agreed not to disclose full terms. Thursday's announcement reads: The board of Embracer is, however, confident that the exercise price stipulated in the option right reflects at least the studio's market value and is significantly higher than the current net book value, including goodwill, of USD 81 million. Long-term licensing publishing rights to all current and future PC console games in the Metro franchise are held within Embracer's PlayOn Group. These rights will not change regardless of whether the option rights are exercised, it said. Embracer CEO Lars Wingeflores said in a statement, "I am pleased that we have found a win-win solution for Embracer and the parts of Saber that now will leave us. This transaction puts both companies in a stronger position to thrive going forward. Embracer is now able to discontinue all operations in Russia, according to a previous board decision, while safeguarding many developer jobs under new independent ownership. At the same time, we will keep key companies, valuable IPs, and future publishing rights. Cash flow is immediately improved, and we remain committed to reducing net debt. The transaction yields additional headroom to amortize debt in accordance with existing bank agreements and will improve financial flexibility. This is the first transaction of the previous mentioned structured processes and marks a small but important step in our journey to transform Embracer into the future for the benefit of all employees, gamers, and shareholders. Saber co-founder Matthew Karch added, "Over the past 4 years, I have been proud to be part of Embracer's amazing transformation into one of the leading game companies in the world. As part of the company's efforts to reorganize for a changed industry and geopolitical challenges, we jointly felt it was the right decision for both Embracer and the core of Saber to part ways. This divestment leaves both parties in much better positions to grow our respective businesses. I will continue to remain a large, long-term shareholder of Embracer, and we will remain partners on several ongoing, and future projects. This transaction also safeguards the livelihoods of hundreds of professionals, many of whom I have worked with for over 2 decades. Since last summer, Embracer has been carrying out a widespread money-saving operation, announcing that it was implementing a restructuring plan which would involve the closure of studios and the cancellations of projects. I'm going to add another update here. The COO of Saber has confirmed the ongoing development of 3 of its upcoming games after its recent sale from Embracer Group led to questions being asked about their status. In a post on Twitter, Tim Willits confirmed that Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2, John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, and Jurassic Park Survival are still in development. I have received a lot of questions concerning the status of some of our previously announced projects now that Saber has separated from Embracer. I'm happy to confirm that we're still working on a number of titles, including Warhammer Space Marine 2, Toxic Commando, and Jurassic Park Survival. We're so excited about these titles and can't wait to share more with everyone soon. Um,
So
so yeah, like this is a very similar thing to Toys for Bob, where they've kind of broken away
yeah,
from the parent company and kind of gone into their own thing. So we
yeah,
now know that Saber Interactive has a financial partner in Beacon Interactive, which is very Saber focused. So that's huge,
yeah. It
and they
is, and
retain a lot of
also,
important IP.
and that's what I like is like I think it's 38 things that they were working on. They were allowed to take with them. I saw that number floating around somewhere. And
Yeah.
that's good because it's not like they're separating and then we have to start everything from scratch. They actually have ongoing projects that they're working on that they can continue working on and release. I think the 4A games bit is interesting just because obviously known for Metro and all that kind of stuff, but Embracer want to keep hold of that franchise, which I don't blame them for. I don't blame them for wanting to keep hold of it, but it would have been nice to allow Metro to actually go with the studio that's
I
known
think
for it.
I think it just comes down to like licensing, where they maybe have the licensing from the books or whatever for like 10 years and they have to honor that, or whatever the case is. Like
Yeah, maybe.
maybe there's a something saying that they can't sell it as part of something.
Yeah.
It'd be the same reason when Warner was
Ultimately,
trying to sell off, their stuff.
the thing about this news is it's only positive, right? Because this isn't Saber going fully independent, like they've been purchased by someone else, but it gets them
Well,
out
kind of
of
by their
a
co-founder.
yeah,
So
but it gets them out of a situation which was probably not a very good one for them. Do you know what I mean? It was probably this or a lot of cancellations and job losses. Essentially, that's probably the situation they were in. And I did see after this, something we've talked about recently about a lot of people saying like there's heavy speculation that Crystal Dynamics is going to be the next one to go, and I think we all think they should go to Microsoft. I think,
Yeah, I mean they're already entrenched with Perfect Dark, so I mean it wouldn't be
yeah,
shocking for them
I'm
for
just
Microsoft to be like,
to
yeah, we're just
give
going to buy it.
as much crap as I've given Embracer, and rightfully so, over the last kind of 6 months or whatever we've been doing this podcast properly, because every week we've had negative news from them. I'm happy that somebody over there finally kind of had the guts to turn around and be like, let's not just close everything down. Let's be sensible and actually be at least willing to sell some of this stuff. Because what's the point of holding on to stuff you're never going to use? It loses value at the end of the day. Like, just hoard all this stuff, never use it, and is not valuable. You know, it's and don't get me wrong, every company has IPs they'll never use. Like, I heard at one time, and I won't say which IP it was, but I heard at one time that a very well-known creator bought an IP that they worked on from the original kind of company that made the game and published the game, and he bought that IP for less than $100,000, and this was like a franchise that had multi-million-pound games in it, but because they were never going to use that IP again, they were quite happy to just sell it for next to nothing because they hadn't used it in years anyway, and it
Yeah.
basically had no value anymore. And I think doing this, what Embracer have done here, it is the right thing to do. This is the right way to deal with these kind of issues. So I do want to give them some credit in that regard, but I wish they had done this stuff earlier. Like, imagine where we could be now if several of those studios that they closed, they were just like, yeah, we'll sell you off. Someone can have you for
They could have tried. I mean, we're maybe not privy to a lot of those types of news, like with Free Radical and whatnot.
That's true. That is true, but I feel like the thing is, they have there's enough companies in the world of gaming and even kind of adjacent to gaming, and Embracer have enough stuff that someone is going to be willing to buy pretty much everything they own. It's kind of like the Tomb Raider franchise. They technically own Tomb Raider, but my understanding is they licensed it to Amazon, right? And they got a lot of money out of that deal, and that's why Amazon is publishing the next Tomb Raider game and all this sort of stuff. But as
Yeah.
far as I know, Amazon didn't buy the Tomb Raider franchise. Like, Embracer still own that. But I guarantee you that, given that Crystal is working with Amazon on Tomb Raider, they will probably be one of the interested parties in them as well. I'm just really, really happy because Saber does amazing stuff, and I'm happy that it's not just them. There is light in that tunnel for 4A games and some of these other little places that we spoke about.
Yeah, 4A is like one of my favorite developers.
Yeah,
With the Metro games, like Metro 2033 is like in my top 10.
so I'm really, really happy about this. I think this is one of the best pieces of news I think we might have ever had on this podcast. And that's not me exaggerating. Like, this is really, really good news for everybody. So I'm happy about that. I do apologize because some of you may have noticed that I wasn't paying full attention during Jeff reading that news story, but the reason was I saw on Twitter that Ninja Theory have released some new shots of Hellblade 2 from the photo mode, so using the in-game stuff, right? And these screenshots, and you can look at them on the Ninja Theory Twitter account. Honestly, they like some of these screenshots and from photo mode, so the game is running. They look real, like they look too good to be in-game shots. It's very, very weird. There's one in particular, and it honestly looks like pre-rendered CGI. Like it's scary,
You
and
gotta remember too, like Ninja Theory is not a big team.
yeah. So I don't know what they're. I know that obviously they were one of the first teams to really pick up an Unreal Engine 5, and I think that clearly they're doing good stuff with it because even Epic have been using them to actually advertise the engine. So I wonder whether there's been some help in terms of getting to grips with that engine from Epic themselves. Um,
Yeah.
but that game's not too far away now. Like that's coming in May, and I assume we'll start seeing previews of it soon and things like that. I'm really looking forward to seeing it because it looks visually. We talked about visuals in games earlier, and I tell you now, no one can complain about the visuals of that game for sure. So
No, it looks absolutely incredible.
yes. So what other news do we have, Jeff? Do we have anything else?
Yeah, so the last two stories are kind of what we've been talking about for, since the podcast began, and that is layoffs. So we almost got into almost got an episode without him. After we had recorded last week, PlayStation backed Deviation Studios has been closed. So they were developing an original IP for PlayStation before it was canceled. So the studio was formed in 2020 by Jason Blundell and Dave Anthony. These are two developers that have been known for Call of Duty. So they were producing a brand new IP for Sony, and again, as part of Sony's kind of plan of shutting down a lot of its multiplayer titles and stuff like that. This is just another victim to that. So that kind of sucks, seeing like a studio that was kind of like built from the ground
Do,
up, working on something for like 3 years,
do you
and
know
then
what really sucks about this one as well? Is that if I remember rightly, this was the studio that got loads of investment from Sony and then randomly just started kind of shedding staff, as in, like, Sony were cutting staff from them when they were partway through development and things like that. And I think this game or this partnership was initially announced like nearly 4 years ago. So they would have been a good chunk into development on whatever they were working on. And it's just really disappointing because maybe this is just me as a creative person speaking, but at some point, and I do understand that sometimes things get cancelled because it can be a tax write off and all that kind of stuff, right? But at some point, there needs to be some sort of legislation put in place that once you cross a certain line, you should almost legally be bound to release the thing. Like,
yeah, especially since it doesn't really help a lot of these people with like resumes, like
yeah,
in regards to being involved with two or three projects and then never seeing them shipped. I mean, hell, like Amy Hennig hasn't had a
that's
game
that's
released since
so
Uncharted
hard.
3.
Like, I know so many developers, and I've had this problem myself of like you work on things and then they either get cancelled or you weren't on the project long enough to earn a credit, so you then can't use that as, do you know what I mean? It's this sort of
Yeah.
stuff is really difficult because people spend years of their lives, and don't get me wrong, as we've spoken about before, this stuff always happens, but it's just frustrating because it's the result of this one in particular feels like it's the result of a company, PlayStation, chasing a trend because they knew that, yeah, okay, to their credit, they did need to diversify their portfolio offering somewhat, but I think that they put all of their eggs into this one kind of live service basket, and then one day someone's come along and gone, oh, actually, we've now decided that's not going to work. Let's effectively cancel everything. and it's leading to the closure of studios. And these are, this for all intents and purposes was a AAA studio when it was first founded. And it's like, these are well known, hard working, great developers who have spent years of their life working on something, and now it's just gone. And it's just so sad to see this stuff. And I'm glad I don't see a picture of bloody Jim Ryan visiting the studio a week ago, because that really would have annoyed me. I don't know what's going on at the moment. Like, it's an industry-wide problem, and I mean, I do know what's going on. The world economy is crazy, and tech being tech always gets really scared when the economy goes a bit weird and they overreact. Like, this has happened before, but I don't know why it specifically is happening more at certain companies than others. I really don't know what it is, and maybe it is just PlayStation kind of refocusing on different things and rebalancing their books, if you will. But my thing
Yeah,
is, they cancelled this project. They cancelled this project years into the development. We know that initially it had about 100 developers, I believe, on this project at this studio. That means they spent tens, if not 100 million plus during the development of this game, and they've now effectively just thrown that money away because it's, oh, instead of spending a bit more and getting the game out and getting at least some return, we're now just going to throw this money away and close down the studio. And it's just like, that stuff's disappointing to me, especially from a company that is still making money. This isn't, let's be very real, this isn't an Embracer situation, where Embracer I can at least understand because they lost out on a $2 billion deal that was in place, and that's a lot of money to lose out on. That's not what's happening at PlayStation. It's not what's happening at lots of these other companies. And I just, like, it really frustrates me. Really, really frustrates me. And I don't know. I'm really worried about this year in gaming specifically, because look at how many job cuts and studio closures we've had already. Like, we've had more
yeah.
studio closures in the last 6 months than I can remember for years prior to that.
We finally had Jeff Keighley kind of break his silence on it. Apparently, he's been working with somebody for the past couple months on some type of like hiring website, and that was one thing that like I was thinking about. I'm like, this would be like I'm seriously, I am absolutely 100% serious. I was thinking like months ago. I'm like, Jeff Keighley should do some type of like LinkedIn type of thing with his reach.
Yeah.
And then this comes out, and I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted Keighley to kind of do.
Somebody needed to do something, right? Like,
Yeah.
hopefully that's
And people
something
were
that helps.
and people were talking about bringing that stuff up more at like the Game Awards and stuff. But the problem is like Game Awards are massively expensive to put on,
Yeah.
so they need to,
He needs to spend that
financially
time making the money.
check
That's the
themselves.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
So
what I will say, and this isn't to be critical, but while we're on the subject of Jeff Keighley, I do think that because of the position he finds himself in the industry, he sometimes plays it too safe with how he approaches certain issues in order to protect himself, probably to
yeah, you don't want to rock the
maintain.
boat and like bash EA, and then EA's like, oh well, we saw what you did back in March. We
Yeah,
don't want you
and it's
don't want to
like,
have our stuff on Game
and
Fest.
that's disappointing, but it's also understandable. Like, from Jeff's perspective, I understand it because he has to do what he has to do for the good of his show and for the good of the people he works with, right? But someone with his level of platform also should have, like, they need to speak up. Those are the kinds of people that can impact change in the industry, because those are the kind of people that get listened to because they have an audience. If you've It's the reason influencers exist.
Yeah.
Right now, companies pay influencers to speak about their products and all that kind of stuff, right? Why do you think they do that? It's because people listen to what influencers have to say. So if an influencer comes out and says, this isn't good enough, something needs to change, everybody else is then going to start saying it, and that collective pressure does change things. It's the same reason that people go on strikes, and it's the same reason that people have protests in their when they're not happy with things that their government are doing. Like, there is such a thing as collective power, but it takes the people with a platform to stand up and say something, you know? And I just wish that someone like Keeley or Keeley himself was more willing to kind of put themselves at some level of risk to do the right thing.
Yeah, the big issue though that comes from a lot of it too, and speaking with like influencers, is a lot of that stuff is like sponsored. A lot of that stuff is like paid.
Yeah.
So there is obviously like a level of like you cannot bash thing that the companies whatever when you're doing these kind of sponsored things and stuff too, because that's why you don't see like Maximilian Dude being played to play Tekken and then completely bashing one part of it or something, right?
But
It's
that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, it it's created this entire problem where people who have these platforms and can make a difference are now like, they are scared to say things that are too negative. Like, they really are. And it's just a shame, because if something is negative and if something is bad, we should be like, that's what freedom of speech exists for. Like, we should be able to say it, and not kind of fear of being cancelled or losing access to something. Like, it's just the right thing to do. I don't know. I find it very frustrating. And like I said, I do understand it from a business and from a kind of Jeff Keighley personal perspective. That man has worked very hard to get to where he is within our industry, and he's worked very hard to get the level of access and trust with developers that he has, and he isn't going to want to jeopardize that. But he's also maybe one of the only people in our industry with the size of platform where he can make a true difference. And that's really frustrating to see.
well, a lot of the people that will be added to that index that he is kind of working on, some people from Respawn. So Apex Legends developer Respawn Entertainment has suffered a round of layoffs as part of wider cuts at parent company Electronic Arts. Publisher announced a restructuring plan last month that will lay off approximately 5% of its global workforce. At the same time, it said that a canceled Star Wars FPS had been in development at Respawn. The Apex team was hit with layoffs today, level designer Aaron Stump wrote on Twitter. It sucks seeing some of the people that I've worked with for almost 3 years now get let go. Hopefully, they'll land on their feet sooner than later. After 20 seasons of Apex and 5 years at Respawn, nearly to this day, my job has been made redundant and I have been laid off, said global social media lead Alex Ackerman. Working on this game and supporting its community has been truly an honor of my career and a highlight of my life. Rough day at EA, rough day at Respawn, said Peter Stewart, a senior writer at the studio. Although I'm thankful to be safe, my thoughts are with everyone affected by the ongoing layoffs, and if there is any way that I can help or signal boost, I will do. It's really hard to find energy and joy to make games in this environment. Announcing the cancellation of the Star Wars FPS, EA Entertainment and Technology President Laura Meal said it will allow the studio to focus on new projects based on Respawn's rich library of owned brands, in addition to existing series like Star Wars Jedi. Apex Legends players can expect to start seeing the game expand beyond the traditional Battle Royale universe over the coming years. EA looks to attract more players to its franchise. Respawn is reportedly working on a new game set in the Titanfall universe, but apparently, according to I think Jeff Grubb, that is not Titanfall 3. So, Respawn, this is a developer that is kind of in the same position as Insomniac, where they have released kind of hit after hit after hit, and even they are not safe. Um,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
interesting. Like Jedi Survivor was really, really well done. It is plagued by some technical issues at launch for sure. But that game is extremely fun.
Yeah. and
Titanfall, like
and
I
the
played
thing
a
about
ton of it.
and the thing about technical issues specifically, and I'm not condoning them, but at least technical issues can be fixed. Design flaws and design shortcomings cannot be fixed, but technical issues can. And you know, I'm not. I'm pretty sure that Survivor isn't perfect even now, but I think it did improve significantly technically after
It's got to a
launch.
really good place. 'Cause I saw Andy Cortez had kind of went back to finally beat it, just because like the issues were really bad when he was, I think, initially doing his playthrough, and
Mm,
that seems a lot better now.
that's good.
But yeah, like one thing that we haven't talked about with the layoffs as well too is that a lot of these people are kind of remote as well.
Yes.
So like they'll have issues where like if they're in the UK, there's a lot of legislation right now around like green card status or whatever it's there,
Yeah.
where like you have to make a certain amount of money, your partner has to make a certain amount of money. Like there's all these different laws that are
And
kind
they
of
also have to I don't know exactly how it works, but I know there is some level of like their workplace has to sponsor them to effectively stay in the country.
yeah.
Um,
So there's a lot of
and
people
not
right
all
now that are,
workplaces are willing to do that either. Like even within the gaming industry, not every
yeah.
studio is actually willing to do that. So there are people who are potentially going to literally have to move countries because of these kinds of layoffs. It's really
Yeah, it,
sad.
and it sucks, especially when you have people that have either like moved to not be remote, like they've literally uplifted their life to move to, Atlanta or something to work at a studio and like,
Yeah.
there. Like it's it sucks. Like I mean, like people, studios are like, well, we can't do remote or anything like that, so you have to move here. And then they move there, and then 6 months later, they're like, yeah, sorry, we're letting you go. Like it's such a it's such a dumb kind of move. Like
But this is also one of the reasons that I'm a really big advocate for um for lots of studios, and not every studio is doing this, but lots are starting to do this, where they've either gone fully remote with some of their teams. So, like in the case of Toys for Bob, they have no office. They're going to be, at least for the medium term, a fully remote studio going forward.
that's a cost cutting thing more so than kind of like a culture, because again, it's a lot cheaper for them to like not rent a studio
Absolutely,
space.
but what I'm saying is that that still avoids this issue of you're not going to have people that are potentially moving literally halfway across the world to work at your studio, right? And I can't remember, but I think maybe Bungie was one of the other ones where they started allowing a lot of people to kind of work remotely if they so chose to do so. Um, and I am a big advocate for that. I think the problem is what has happened over the last couple of years is that while COVID proved that remote game development can be done, it also showed that remote game development is significantly slower than
Yeah, and you're also dealing with a lot of security risks as well too. There's
yeah.
been a lot of like cases for that
And
kind of stuff.
therefore, even in the slowness part of it, if your development is significantly slower, that means the game costs significantly more money to make. And that's why I think we're seeing, even over the last 18 months, we have seen quite a lot of studios sort of starting to enforce, okay, we need you to come back into the office now. And we saw this recently. I don't know if you saw it, Jeff, but there was a report that Rockstar have basically asked every single member of their staff to go back into the office to work over the next year while they finish off GTA 6. And it's
And I
because
think a
they,
lot of that might have to do with security issues, considering the big GTA leak.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So it's, I think that it's a really unfortunate thing, and like you said, it does lead to these, it leads to these problems where when people get laid off, they've kind of moved to God knows where to work for a studio, and they might be there for 6 months. Like, they have no
there's one guy that
guarantees.
his life stream to work at Blizzard, and he was there for 4 months.
That's
He
crazy.
moved
That's
to,
crazy.
to, to work there. But yeah, that's it for news. I mean, we'll definitely be back next week with a lot more news.
Yeah.
But
And
Jordan,
at least we had some positive news this week.
yes,
So it is
yeah, definitely
improving slightly.
getting there.
Well,
One day we will have an episode where we don't have any news, but
yeah, yeah. No
that,
layoffs.
that's
Hopefully, that's the. Hopefully, let's all cross our fingers that in next week's episode or the next episode that we do, we have no layoffs to speak of. That would be
yes, you
nice.
jinxed it. You jinxed it. Now it's going to be like 7% of the entire industry is just gone.
Don't say that.
Jinxed it, Jordan.
So let's talk about what we've been playing.
Yeah.
I'll go first because last night I put up a review on the site, but it might not be for the game you expect. This one is for Taxi Life, which is a city driving simulator where, as the name suggests, you drive a taxi. And the way I would describe it, the kind of quick pitch is they're trying to be somewhere between a flight sim game for taxis and a business management game. And go and read my full review, which I'll link below. But the long and short of this game is the concept is really, really cool, and it is unique, and there is fun to be had. Like, one of the things I mention is that the driving AI in this game is the most realistic I've ever seen. Like, and that's both a good and a bad thing, but for me, with this kind of game, you want it to be as realistic as possible. So, for example, when I'm driving along the road and I see someone run a red light and then get smashed into the side of by another car, like, that is something that actually happens in real life. But in video games, that never happens because driving AI in city games in particular is almost always too perfect, if that makes sense. They almost like,
Yeah, they just like stop on the side of the road and wait for you to pass or
yeah,
something like that. Like,
yeah. Whereas this has imperfections. Like, I'll be stopped at a set of lights, and every now and again, a car will just plow into the back of me where it hasn't managed to brake in time. Or, you'll be driving along and they won't indicate. They won't, they won't signal to change lane. They will just completely like cut you up. But all of this stuff leads to a more realistic feeling driving experience. And that isn't to say the driving in this game is the best ever, but the AI that's built around it for the type of experience they're trying to make is much more grounded than most other games that I've ever really seen. Um, and then you have the AI of people walking around that get caught on trees and start bugging out and doing, they'll shake and do weird little things. But the core idea that this game is built on is a really good one. and it is an enjoyable game. It's quite a nice, some people might describe it as like a podcasting game because it's quite a nice game where you could put on a pair of headphones, listen to a podcast, and just drive people around and make money
Mm.
and unlock new cars. And as you unlock new cars, you can hire more drivers for your business, and that's where the business management part comes in. Is you hire drivers and you can actually set what zone of the city they work in because the game is based in Barcelona, and you can set which zone of the city they work in and what specific time of the day that they work. However, there's this weird problem. The one problem with the game design for me is the fact that if I rest in the game, none of my AI drivers are making my company money, even if they're meant to be working, but they still
Yeah.
cost me money. And that
Mm.
I don't think it's a bug because it actually comes up and tells you, oh, when you rest, they're not going to make you money. And it's like, but that's a weird choice because why have a rest function at all then? Like, you might as well never rest in the game because when you rest, you're not going to make money, but it's going to cost you money because you've hired drivers. It's a very strange thing, but mostly it's just technical stuff that lets this experience down, and you know it's so much so that I won't tell you what I've scored it here, but go and read the review. But I think that without the technical issues, this game could potentially be like a whole 2 points higher on the review scale. So it is a shame. It really is a shame because it's a unique and interesting idea that that does set itself apart from something like a Crazy Taxi, but it needed the level of polish and care that Flight Sim had to be what it wants to be, and it just doesn't have that, unfortunately.
Have have you tried playing Offspring while
No,
playing this game? No?
I haven't, but I should have. I
No?
really should have.
Yeah. Just have that going as you're like going over a hill.
But Jeff, you tell me, because you've actually put out a couple of reviews since our last episode. One of them was the Mud Runner game, Expeditions. Um, but you've also played something else that you put out a review for, and you mentioned it briefly earlier. So why don't we talk about that one first?
Yeah, so I was playing Outcast: A New Beginning. So this is the sequel that they kind of wanted to make back in the early aughts. Because in 1999 they released Outcast, which was one of the first open world games. It was actually I believe it's the first 3D open world game. So they kind of pioneered the open world genre. And this is a sequel to that because like Appeal Studios, they filed for bankruptcy in 2002. And then they came back in 2000, 17 or whatever to release Outcast Second Contact, um, which is a remake of that game. So it's not a sequel. And then when they announced Outcast: A New Beginning, which sounds like a reboot to me because Second Contact sounds like a sequel. A New Beginning sounds like a reboot, but it's the exact opposite. And so this is the sequel that they wanted to make. They said that the studio came back to make it. Um, that 60%, 60 to 70% of the studio is the original studio, and
That's
that they
cool.
use design documents from the original sequel that was scrapped when they filed for bankruptcy. So this game, right off the bat, does feel dated. It does feel like it is a remaster of an older game.
That
The open world
almost
is
that
absolutely sorry.
that I was gonna say that almost seems like from what you're saying though that's potentially kind of 100% intentional, as in if they were using the
Could
old design documents anyway, they probably because what I can relate it to is like Shenmue 3, right? When Shenmue 3 came out, obviously
be.
they developed that on a smaller budget, but
Yeah.
they used the original design documents and the original story plan they had and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the for them it was, let's make this game as though we were making it then, so that people can play it and kind of be like, oh, this is what it would have been like to play it then, when it
Yeah.
should have come
Like
out.
it doesn't feel as old as say like the original, or even Second Contact, because I booted up Second Contact the other day just to kind of like play through some of it.
Okay, that's
And
good.
they definitely changed the design of Cutter Slade. He's now more insurance salesman than James T. Kirk.
Okay.
Um, and like the game is what I was talking about before. The world itself looks gorgeous. The people, however, don't. And like the Talon alien race, there's only really like three or four character models, and they just put them in slightly different clothes or slightly different colors or whatever the case is. But like when you meet like the first Shamaz, which is their healer, every other character that you see that is of that type is that same character model. And like there's very when they start attaching names to these characters and stuff, which you will never remember, you will immediately get confused about who you're talking to because you'd be like, "Oh, hey, you're that guy from that village," and he's like, "No, I am Bleep Block." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're just the same character model." Um, but
That's actually quite funny.
like it's so weird. Um, like the game is like it plays extremely fun though. Like combat's really nice. You can set the auto aim to like be very aggressive. So you could literally just point your cursor at birds and stuff and it'll shoot them down even if the bullet's not even near them. So it
Nice.
makes the combat not tedious, which is nice. The jetpack is the big selling point of that game because you can basically jetpack all around and like when you're gliding, there's no stamina loss. So you can just glide pretty much for as long as your descending climb will go. Because when you start to climb up, your glide wings glow red, which means that you can't progress any height. So it's got your standard open world stuff like conquering bases and like collecting like collectible things and stuff like that, like in terms of like doing these like puzzle activities to like gain more health or more upgrade currencies. There's skill trees for both your weapons and your jetpack and your skills. Um, there was one part in the game where I didn't know if I was actually going to be able to beat it.
Ah, yes,
There
I
is
remember
a
you telling me about this while you were
there
playing
is
it.
a race. Yeah, there's a there when you have to complete three races and you have to control these like types of like winged beasts. And basically all it shows you, or actually I think I have a picture of it. Um, all it shows you basically is these like crude do I have it or not? Maybe I don't. Um, yeah, like it shows you this like wait, maybe I do. Let me see here. Yeah, here we are. So it shows you these like
Ah, yes.
controls for the beast. And it's basically just like it doesn't tell you what those controls do. It doesn't tell you what pressing up on the left stick or down on the right stick or moving the sticks. So in order to like actually turn, you have to use both sticks to like make a right turn
And you have
or
to do
both
it in
sticks to make a
opposite
left turn.
directions, don't you? Is that what you
And
said?
opposite directions and stuff. You can change the things like the horizontal and vertical and stuff. You could change those things, but it doesn't really do much. We ended up putting it down to story difficulty so that the enemy racers would go like maybe a little slower. The problem is you're fighting with these controls, trying to get these things to go. It's going against like even like my roommate Becky who ended up actually doing the race. I'm like, "Here, can you try and do this?" And she did it, and she was like, "This literally broke my brain because it goes against all the training that you have with a video game."
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know how it got past any type of testing or anything. It's doing this, but it's also doing this while the game is running at like 5 to 10 FPS.
That's not
And then
good.
there's moments where you go around a turn and then it just locks up for like 15 seconds. You think the game froze. There's one part in the Silver Cup where she hit a rock and stopped and we saw them go through the finish line, and
Oh
then she went
wow.
up to the finish line, and it's like, you win. We're like, what? We're like, we'll take it.
Oh
We'll
my
take it.
god.
We'll absolutely take it. We have no idea. It was so dumb. But that's the only part of the game that I can say was absolute dog shit.
Okay.
Like the story is not amazing. It's not as clever as the first one. Because the first one had really cool things. Like you go to this planet and then you realize that the people that you came there with arrived decades earlier because of some weird spatial anomaly. So like you get to this world where this like legacy about humanity is kind of there, and this buildup of this chosen one, and you end up being this chosen one. And it's a really neat story. And this one does continue on from there. You find out what happened to Cutter Slade, which is something I did not see coming. It's got some really decent little moments, but the character moments are kind of undone by like the gameplay, or the moment to moment gameplay in between those moments just not being satisfying, because like you go to these villages and you gain their trust so that you end up getting this token, and then you can take this token to the person that is kind of controlling your presence on the planet.
Okay.
Then that contributes to like some type of like mating ritual thing, because they need all these types of like tokens to like celebrate this thing. So it's kind of a weird thing where it's not like, we need you to help with this mating ritual. Like once every cycle this thing happens. So we need these 7 tokens or whatever the case is. So that part of the story is very, very boring. The parts of the story that are decent is when it actually ties into why they're on the planet, what's happening with the planet, what happened with humanity, what happened with Cutter Slade. Like those moments are fine, but they're so few and far between. And so when you're interacting with these people, they're like, "Oh, we need you to like go and like wrangle all these like cows and stuff into our pen." And so you go and do that with your jetpack, and we need you to go and like find these fruits or these vegetables or whatever the case is. And this stuff is just not fun. Even the bases get repetitive because it's the same basic base, like especially when you're fighting like the drills, which are these like mini bosses, they're the same fight. When you're fighting like these worms, they're like, okay, now you got to fight the alpha one. It's the same thing but red. So like there's not a lot of character models in this game, from the aliens that you're interacting with to the robots, which are like, okay, that's a blue one, that's a red one, that's a black one. Like that's all that is there. Even the fights against the human characters is just the same fight. You're in this little arena, they have a jetpack, and they basically fly around and shoot at you. It's the same fight. You do that twice or 3 times, and it's the exact same fight. Um, like the last boss is interesting, but it's a little bit more of the same kind of thing. But like I will say is like the gameplay in this game, the shooting, the exploration, all that stuff is great. It does have a generic open world in regards to how it's designed. It's
Okay.
really easy to fast travel to where you have to go. Um, but it is the type of game that if you are like, I just kind of want like a Xbox 360 kind of open world game, because like I like that classic stuff.
Yeah.
Because like this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like my favorite kind of genre, which is kind of like the Eurojank kind of third person games. I love them. I absolutely love the passion that's put into these games. I think this game has that. I just don't think that it is a game that feels released in 2024.
That's fair. That's fair. Kind of makes sense to me. It sounds fairly decent. We'll obviously link Jeff's review below. That is Outcast, and you can go and read that review. But Jeff, you have also played some more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is something I
Yeah,
haven't done yet. So please don't spoil too much for me. But yeah, what? How are you getting on with the game?
yeah, I'm in chapter 9 right now. I'd be working on it more today, but I'm working on an embargo right now for a game. So once I kind of get make some headway on that one, I'm going to be jumping back into Final Fantasy for a couple hours. But no, Final Fantasy Rebirth. I'm in chapter 9. So I've done like the whole beach thing with the whole like Tifa bikini thing that has been, capturing social media. So I've done already that. What I'm doing is I'm going into an area, I'm doing the main mission, and then I'm exploring the entire map. So right now I'm in kind of like a jungle area, which is a little weird to navigate because like you have to like get to certain areas and then jump on a mushroom and then with the chocobo and then that spring loads you to another area that is not accessible if not for that mushroom. So like exploring that area is a little tedious. Um, I saw one tweet that kind of I kind of agree with and I kind of don't, and that is that the open world stuff feels remarkably pointless because it doesn't feel like it's contributing to like the actual story.
I've heard that from quite a few people, and the way that I've heard it is that the open world stuff feels like a very traditional open world kind of
It yeah,
checklisty type thing.
it feels like it's bloating the game for its length more so than the like the scale of what the game could feel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mini games, but I mean, Final Fantasy VII had a lot of mini games, so this isn't new. I do hate the fact that Queen's Blood is forced upon you in certain scenes. Like you cannot get out of this particular area unless you defeat three people
Oh, interesting.
in Queen's
Okay.
Blood. Like you have to because like you have to collect fruit for the chocobo. And so in order to do that, you have to go and talk to these guys, and then they'll take you into an alley and you beat them up and you get that. And you do this, and then there's one guy's like, "Well, if you beat these three people in Queen's Blood, I'll give you one of these things." And it's like,
that that
"All
makes
right,
me
let's do it."
that makes me glad that I've at least been engaging. Like when I have played the game, I've at least engaged with Queen's Blood a little bit, just because that should hopefully make that a bit
I've
easier
been
for me to
buying
deal with.
all of the cards that I come across in case I need to advance the deck. I
Yeah.
really don't like it.
I mean,
But
my
like,
thing is, like I said before, it's good. It's just really not Gwent. Like I don't know where that comparison even came from, but this card game isn't in the same
well,
league as Gwent.
the reason I believe the reason that it came from is because the guy who created Queen's Blood was a massive fan of Gwent. He's publicly stated
Oh,
this.
interesting. Okay, okay. I
But
just
like, you're
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
For me, it's just it's very basic, and too much of the card game is down to pure luck rather than skill. Whereas with something like Gwent, it felt like you had genuine skill. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I wouldn't say luck. I think that there's a certain there's a couple cards that if I play them in certain ways, I almost guaranteed myself a victory. I just have to make sure that RNG works on my favor because I got a chocobo card you get at the very beginning, which is crucial. I've got a bunch of other cards that can kind of destroy other cards. So like I've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
I will say though that if you're on the boat, you can win it if you want. I think it's way more funnier if you don't.
Okay. Okay.
Um, because there's a certain character that steps up going, well, fine, Cloud, if you're not going to do it, I am. And it's so fun, so funny. But
Nice. Nice.
from a from an overall perspective though, Rebirth is stunning. I think there's some visual problems with the game. I think there's some texture quality, that stuff that's not that great. But I think from like the presentation point of view, in terms of like the side quests and like how good the combat is, I think the combat
Yeah.
just continues to get
And I
better
will
as you
say,
start
because last time we spoke about the game, I wouldn't say I was low on the combat, but I was
you hated
certainly.
it. You tweeted me later scathing. There was lots of all caps.
But
Um,
what I will say is, I have, so since we last spoke about it, although I haven't played the game a lot, because as you know, I reviewed Taxi Life, and I've also got another game that is out that I'll be reviewing, but I won't spoil that because when I say things, apparently I just nearly die a lot of the time, and, and then things don't happen, and I'm not even exaggerating. This is the thing, like, I'm here laughing about this, but Jeff knows that I'm telling the truth. Like, I'll say stuff, and then it doesn't happen for 10 years because my life just falls apart. But
At least that game's only 4 hours long.
yes, yeah. So I am reviewing a shorter game as well, and that's part of the reason I haven't played much Rebirth yet. But what I wanted to say was I have played a little bit more of it, and as you get to grips with the combat more and the things that you can actually do and the way you can chain certain things together, like this combat is very good. It's very, very good. And also what I do
Especially when you
like,
start learning more about the pressuring and the staggering, because
yes,
there's little boss fights you'll get in where they'll have like three basic requests, and most of the time it's pressure an enemy, stagger an enemy, and defeat the enemies in a certain amount of time. You
yes,
do not need to defeat all three tabs in order to have that mission complete.
yes, yeah. But I do so yeah, as I kind of learn more about it with the synergy abilities and all that kind of stuff, I do think the combat is good here. There's still a small part of me that just wishes that I could see what they would have done if they would have chosen one direction or the other instead of trying to do this middle ground thing. But I get why they're doing the middle ground situation, because I think what it is they didn't want to fully abandon the turn-based DNA of the original game, but they wanted to do something to freshen it up, and so they've gone for this middle ground, obviously, between turn-based and real-time action gameplay, and it is a nice mix. I don't know, there is a small part of me, maybe it's just the creative part of my brain, which is what would they have done if they had only gone for an action based game? Do you know what I mean? Or what would they have done
I
if
mean,
they had
that's kind of
gone?
what we got with Final Fantasy 16, where it
True,
basically was like a character action game, and it
true.
just lacked the RPG
And then it wasn't
mechanics.
even an RPG. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That is true. But yeah, so I have enjoyed that. I'll let you
Yeah,
talk
it's excellent.
more about it now, because I this is the thing. You're quite far into it from what I can tell, and the fact that you're still saying it's excellent says to me that it must be very, very good. So I am
Yeah, I think I
looking
probably have like
forward.
another 30 hours.
I'm looking forward to getting back to it. Obviously, I'll speak a little bit more about it when I've played more. I am also still reviewing Infinite Wealth. I haven't forgotten, people. Um, but obviously that one got delayed slightly in terms of me finishing the game, just because I was ill. Then I had a game to review for embargo, and also this is going to be my longest review. Like, I've written about half of it at the moment, and to put it into perspective, if you go and read my Taxi Life review, that is nearly as much as I've already written about Infinite Wealth, and I haven't even finished the review yet. So that kind of lets you know how long it's going to be. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, like
I haven't played anything else, but I don't know, how. My thing is, I'm a little bit intimidated, Jeff, by Rebirth, because you're saying to me you're in chapter 9 or whatever it is, and you think you have about 30 hours left. How much of this game
yeah,
have you
I'm at
played?
I think I'm at 36 hours right now.
Wow, okay, so it's a pretty long one then.
Yeah, like and like again, I'm doing every single side quest. The one thing that I've stopped doing though is unlocking like removing the fog of war from everything, because some aspects of its map don't have the fog clear.
Okay.
And so my ADHD is just completely just killing me. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do every side quest and every like map
I
thing
I remember
on
that
the in the environment.
I remember that troubling you when you were playing Banishers, and there was a certain bit of the like fog of war that you couldn't get rid of, and it really
It's like a
troubled
little
you.
like line, and I'm like, God damn it. I'm like, look, what Final Fantasy needs to do is if you complete like they if they break the map up into quadrants, where if
Yeah,
you complete an entire quadrant, it just unlocks,
the
it just
whole map.
reveals that map.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's what they should do. To be fair, every game in existence should do that, because if we're being real, every open world game still has regions within its map, right?
Yeah, and
Uh,
like I used to like reveal the fog of war in Sacred 2. Like I
yeah,
used to run my character up where I was like humping the freaking mountain just to basically like get a smidgen of a little bit of the map
nice.
cleared off.
I bet you loved. Did you ever play Skyrim back in the day, Jeff? I bet you loved clearing that map.
Not a fan of Skyrim.
Oh wow! Oh wow! We
I think
need.
with mods it was a lot better, but then the mods broke a save and I couldn't get back into it. And even when I
Oh, that's a
removed the
shame.
mods,
That's a shame.
I couldn't play the game. So like, yeah, I'm not a Skyrim fan,
I've.
which is weird considering like I have the collector's edition because like, we ended up getting what like there was a long story short, I ended up getting a collector's edition for like the price of like the regular game. I
Nice.
have the dragon.
Nice.
I don't know where I got it.
Jeff is lucky sometimes, people. I reckon he's taken all of my luck, and this is why I get ill. But but you.
Well, happened is someone had bought a collector's edition or something, and the game wasn't working,
Oh
so they
wow.
ended up
Okay.
getting a they ended up having a collector's edition here, and they took the game out of it, and then uh exchanged it, so that one was in the defective, and I'm like, well, can I just buy that
Yeah.
like the price of like the game, whatever? So I ended up getting the one with the big dragon
Oh
and
nice.
stuff like that. I
Nice.
don't know
That's
where it is, but like
really
it's
cool.
weird because like I am a fan of like the Elder Scrolls stuff because like even on my stand here, I've got like the Elder Scrolls Online like pewter statues, like those big guys. Like there's like the big like um mecha or kind of thing. Here, I'll take a picture and show you guys.
Nice. Nice. Jeff has a lot of stuff, people. Like honestly, this man has so many gaming collectibles.
See, like I've got the
Oh,
statues there
nice. Yeah.
on there. They're the black. You can't see it because it's not focusing or whatever. But yeah, I got like the
Is
big
that the
statues
Metal Gear
there.
Solid 5 hand?
Yes. Yeah,
I
with the
thought
middle
so.
finger up.
I have
And
that one
there's
as well.
my from King of Fighters, and then like the Batman statue stuff.
Nice,
But
nice. I
yeah, like I love the Elder Scrolls stuff, but it's just Skyrim for some apparent reason. I think it was just because it got released so many freaking times with
yeah,
slight little versions and
yeah.
stuff, and I thought the gameplay and stuff was
I
like
mean,
fairly kind of
I
fun.
was fortunate enough that I played it on original release, and it was one of those games that I never finished, but there's something about Bethesda games that you don't. I actually think the majority of people that play them never finish them because
And I think that Elder Scrolls Online is better than Skyrim.
interesting. Okay.
I had way more fun, especially when you go back to like, like places in like Morrowind and stuff like that in that
Yeah.
game, or even some of the places in Skyrim. I think you can go back to Winterfell
yeah.
in a while.
So I want to end here by talking about some of the ideas I've had for future episodes, and Jeff doesn't know this. So we'll
Oh,
have a we're going to have a live discussion here about the future of the podcast. Jeff, I think we should do an episode, and this one will take some preparation. I know what you're like. You like to prepare very well. But I think we
if I
should
have
do.
time.
I think that we should do an episode which is our games of the decade. And we should look back over the last 10 years because it's been just over 10 years now since the previous generation started. And I thought what might be a nice thing to do is basically take our own personal game of the year from each of those years and just have a nice discussion about, all of those different games and how far we've come in that time. So
As
if
long as
Jeff
I've got the
agrees, you
as
might.
long as I've got the time, like it would have to be during like a kind of a dry spell with some of the games, just because like again, like I'm
Yeah, Jeff's a busy
you
man.
know
I hate to think
taking for my
he
time.
he's got some reviews out the door, but I'm sure he has like God knows how many more to work on.
Oh, I've got lots of unfinished one. I still have a unfinished review for Hogwarts Legacy, an unfinished review for like Street Fighter 6.
Nice.
I started
That
one for Tekken, but
that
I just
makes
haven't
me
had the
that
time
makes
to.
me think, actually, for people that are sort of new here and don't know how we function necessarily as a website. Um, we are a smaller website and we don't get codes for everything, but if we want to review a game, we will review it. But what we tend to do is, if the game has already been released, we don't we don't kind of rush and bust our guts to get you the review as quickly as possible. And that doesn't mean we're going to be slow. Like in my case, like I said, the Infinite Wealth review is taking me longer than I would have liked, but there were circumstances outside of my control which delayed that one,
Yeah,
right?
if
Um,
we get the code early enough, we'll definitely shoot for embargo
yeah,
because like
but
I'll
there are
save for
so
embargo.
for example, there are games coming up. Well, later this week when you're seeing this episode, on Friday this week, obviously things like Dragon's Dogma 2 and Rise of the Ronin will be releasing. Um, Jeff was saying earlier that he's probably not going to have the funds to pick up Rise of the Ronin. I can't review that game because I have some small connection to it that I can't really even talk about. Um,
You can get me a code.
um, but something like Dragon's Dogma 2, we're not going to be getting a code for that. I'm pretty certain, and
No, Capcom. Look at us.
and but we will. I'm pretty sure that if one of us plays it at some point in the future, we will review it. It's the kind of game that we
Yeah,
will.
I, I definitely am going to review it because that is one game that I'm going to be buying out of pocket. Um, because like I love the first one.
Yeah. So it's just what I would say is stick with the website. Head over there, read the 2 reviews that we've got in the description. Like I said before as well, every week now I'm going to make sure that mine and Jeff's latest review is kind of pinned in the description there for you to have easy access to. Please share this podcast with all your friends, but also share the website with your friends, because we have news all the time. We have, like I said, game reviews. I don't know how many Jeff's done in the last month, but at one time he did like 10 reviews in a month or something, I believe.
Yeah, this year's been really slow. I was checking on it. I'm like, oh man, I can't believe we only have like 14 or 15 reviews this month or
Yeah.
this year.
So
But
so keep an eye on us, because we will, like, Jeff's always working on reviews. I do as many as I can. Like I said, I've got a couple of reviews coming up over the next week or so. You should be seeing those, all being well. Um, there's going to be more reviews coming up in the future months. We had the news recently, the reveal of the Top Spin 2K25 release date, and we had that news up on the site. We were one of the first websites to have that news, and we broke that news. So just stay tuned with us. Like this podcast. Leave your comments. I don't know, Jeff. Do we have a question of the week this week?
yeah, that's one thing I actually forgot to set up on there. I guess the question of the week is, what is a topic that you would like us to cover?
There you go. Because we would like some more community engagement here. So, what is a
Oh, I
topic
actually
you'd
had a
like us to cover?
coworker who actually asked if we had covered this particular question.
Oh
And
yeah,
that was, what is a type of game that you kind of like shouldn't love, but you do love? Like
like
kind
a
of like
guilty pleasure.
guilty pleasure, like like whether it was something like Fortnite, where
Yeah,
like like you kind of like
yeah.
don't let people know you play it, like that kind of thing.
So basically, we're gonna do a guilty pleasure episode. Here's one that I would like to do. So let's note this down and make sure we do this. Games that, because I saw this from, I think it was Paris Lily earlier in the week, but I do think is a really cool kind of podcast topic. Games that you love that you wish had a sequel. Um,
Brute force.
You know, so
after
so
it's
the
done.
easy one for me, and obviously if we do there'll be many others when we do a podcast on it. But the easy one for me was Days Gone. Like I really think Days Gone should have had a sequel. It had something there that
Got around to beating it. I hated that mission structure of like you do a quest and then it would build on to like this like giant multi-tier quest. And
yeah.
that reminds me like the UI in Outcast in New Beginning is so weird
Oh,
for
is
how
it
you do
okay?
how it like this weird honeycomb system where like you don't know really kind of what you're doing in order. It's
Oh
weird.
wow. Oh
It's
wow.
really
That's fun. Well, so I think that's it for this week. We don't really have anything else to talk about. Um, So yeah, just let us know in the comments what topics would you like us to cover, because we do have a lot of news every week, but I would like to start having more topic-based discussions as well, just so that we can do some interesting little things. It's just that those kinds of things, which I know some people who watch the show have requested, those sorts of things do take a bit more preparation, so we have to think about them in advance, and that's why it's good if you can leave your comments below, or even, like I said, follow us on Twitter,
yeah,
follow
I
you
think
know.
I think one thing we'll do with the podcast as well is we'll start doing a playlist for like all the episodes. So you
Absolutely.
can just kind of like stream them onto the
Yeah.
background, just kind of get views up. Like
Yeah.
the thing about it too is like the website and the podcast, we don't make any money from it.
No.
So the best we get is basically having, people check the website and so we get codes and things like that. So I mean it definitely kind of pays us that way in a lot of ways.
And I know
So
that
like,
some of you as well are only watchers or listeners of the podcast, and what I would say is if you can take 5 minutes to go over and visit the website, even if you never sort of use the website on a regular basis, if you just go and read our most recent reviews every week for a couple of minutes, that will really help us, because
yeah,
the more viewership we can get on the website, the more that we're going to be able to bring you guys unique coverage, which isn't only going to help the website, but it's going to help this show, and then it's going to make it better for you, better for us. And like Jeff said, we don't make any money from this. We're doing this as a hobby, essentially, right? Like, yeah, it's something we're both deeply interested in and we enjoy doing, but we're not doing it to make money. We're not making money right now.
yeah, and we would have a lot more on the website in terms of like featurettes and like previews and all that kind of stuff if we were, essentially being able to be funded from it. But I mean, like I'm still working like a full 40-hour job, with a 40
Yeah.
minute commute. So
And
like my
and
time is
that's also why things sometimes take us a bit longer. Like you'll notice that sometimes we don't post news until a day or two after other websites might have it.
even
And
a couple hours after too, because like I'll get the news when I'm at work.
yeah, and hopefully that is somewhere that I've been able to help slightly, just because me and Jeff being in different time zones has made it a bit easier to pick certain things up depending on the time and stuff like that. Because even game embargoes, sometimes you'd be very surprised, but sometimes they can be at really weird times of day. And yeah, so just please support us best you can. We're not asking you for any money. We don't have a Patreon or anything like that.
Oh, and if you have connections to places that can kind of like sponsor the podcast and stuff, whether it's things like HelloFresh or whatever the case is, and like you want to sponsor the podcast and
Yeah,
stuff like that. We don't
because
have a massive audience,
one thing I will
but
say to people, because this has actually been asked about a few times, the reason that there's not an audio version only of the podcast right now is because that would cost us, yes, not very much, but it would cost us some money to put that out there, because you need to pay a hosting service to then, put your RSS in all these places. It's very, very kind of complicated stuff. But that does come with a small fee. And until we do make at least even a small amount of money, that's just something that we can't really afford to do. But I know it's something that you guys do want. So, like Jeff said, if you do have, I know of some people that watch and listen to this podcast that, they work for different companies and things like that. If you do have any interest in sponsorship or anything like that, please let us know. And you know what? I say that we're not asking you for money and we don't have a Patreon, but if you would have any interest in supporting us on something like a Patreon, let us know in the comments, because then we can at least consider it. Like, we're not going to do something until we know that people want it. That's the thing, is we don't want to, like Jeff said, he does a full-time job. I still do things as well myself. It's we can't spend our time investing into things more than we're able to without knowing that people actually want it. So if you would like the option to support us for $1 a month, for example, because that's probably all we'd ask for, is $1 a month per person, and after a couple of people do that, we would be able to get an audio version, right? So if that's something you'd be interested in order to get an audio version of this show, let us know in the comments, that kind of thing. Because we're not, like Jeff said,
Yeah.
we're not making money. We're not out here begging you for money. We're just doing this for the love of it. But the more that we're able to access, and if we are able to make some money from this, it would then allow us to do more things for all of you. And that's ultimately what we want to do with this show. So please continue to support us. Like, subscribe, share it with all your friends. Follow us on Twitter. We have both a podcast Twitter and a website Twitter as well. So I'll make sure both of those are in the description, because...
Yeah, and we're going to start posting some stuff on some other social media platforms as well too. I'm going to try and get something going on kind of Instagram to go with that kind of stuff. We're also on Blue Sky.
If there's anywhere in particular that you would like us to make sure that we post news and things like that from the website, please let us know, because that's something we could probably quite easily do between the two of us. So, if you want your news on Facebook, for example, not everybody does. I don't know anyone who uses Facebook anymore. But if you want website news from the website over on Facebook, let us know, and that's something we can think about and sort out if necessary.
And you can. We also started up Blue Sky as well too. So I just have my official account on there basically, which is at necromancerasg.bsay.social. So we're going to be posting some stuff on there as well too.
Nice.
And then
I'm not guaranteeing this, but I am considering maybe becoming the face of a TikTok for us. It's something we jokingly spoke about the other day, but that would take us some time and things like that.
You should just do a VTuber TikTok.
So
be a cute little anime.
So yes, you'll see more news from us in more places. I hope you enjoy your time over on the website. I hope you enjoy listening to this show. Once again, as we always say, please let us know any improvements we can make to this show. Speak about topics you want to see from us in the comments. Engage with us on Twitter, all of that good stuff. And until next time, stay in the mix.